New era in Iowa City. 10 listeners in, and the word offense isn't followed by a sigh. The Hawkeyes are moving in a positive direction. We're breaking down what's finally working offensively and what the last regime refused to fix. Today, Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. I've been covering the Hawkeyes for over 20 years on the radio here in the state of Iowa, including currently on the Iowa Sports Radio Network. We got stations all fanned across the state, over in Western Iowa in Sioux City, on the other side of the state in the Quad Cities, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, and our flagship 106.3 KXNO in Des Moines, talking the world of sports each and every day from noon to 2 with Ken Miller. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We have a lot to get into today. The Iowa baseball team, a huge bounce back victory against St. Thomas, setting up the scene and what could be an epic series against Indiana coming up this weekend at home at Banks Field. Looking forward to that one. Plus, we hear from the coordinators, and that's where we begin today with a lot of football talk. Phil Parker, the defensive coordinator, some thoughts on this defense and maybe a couple of big names making big steps forward here. And that question we had at D tackle very well could be answered. We'll also talk special teams with Lavar Woods, but we begin with a look at the offense and an Iowa offense that has become a punchline, laughing stock, hard to watch. Tim Lester in year number one made big improvements. Iowa goes from the final year of Brian Ferentz, 2023, averaging 16 points per game to averaging 27 points per game a year ago. And they did it with a passing game that still was never able to get on track. A running back who was incredible in Caleb Johnson, but a very pedestrian passing game. And they were able to make those kind of improvements without being able to throw the football. And now you look forward. You look at what Iowa is building for this year. And just listening to Tim Lester, listening the way that he communicates, that he is able to effectively lay out the reason that this Iowa team is going to be different, that this Iowa team is absolutely going to have an opportunity to do things offensively we haven't seen in a really long time. You hear him speak, and he just gets it. He can break it down in very layman terms for people like me. He can explain it in a way that makes sense for the fans, for the media, but you also know that there's a deeper knowledge. You also understand in listening to him what exactly it is that he's going for and he's looking to build. A couple notes, and got plenty of things to talk about on the offensive side of the football, but it goes hand in hand. So Iowa, just the other day, brings in another quarterback, Jeremy Hecklinski from Wake Forest. Redshirt freshman, redshirted last year at Wake Forest. 4 years of opportunity at Iowa or wherever his career goes. And he follows Warren Ruggiero, who was the offensive coordinator there, now an analyst with Iowa. But, it got me think about this. Iowa, we have seen for a long time now, it's been set up in a way where it feels like they didn't want competition at the quarterback spot, that they were just so nervous about losing their starter that they weren't willing to bring in big-time competition. They didn't want to hurt feelings. You go back to last year. We saw it. Cade McNamara in 2023. He was banged up. Start of the year, has that hideous leg injury with the quad strain that he suffered at Kids Day, and he was never right, and then eventually tore his ACL. But instead of looking at him, looking at his limitations, and going out and say, you know what, we can still invest in this spot. They didn't do that. They brought in last minute Brendan Sullivan, but they were not actively looking for somebody that really they believe could push. And even Sullivan pushed Cade McNamara in August. And it goes back to before that. That's not the case here. They lose Brendan Sullivan. Congratulations. Commits to Tulane for his final year of eligibility. Good place to be. New Orleans for your last year. Good work out of him. But instead of just resting on their laurels, no, they're going out and they're looking for talent. Because this year it's going to be Mark Gronowski's team. But then after that, we think it's going to be Hank Brown, the Auburn transfer. But these young guys coming in, Jimmy Sullivan, maybe it can be Jackson Stratton. Maybe it very well could be Hecklinski might be the kid. Whatever it is, they're bringing in competition. Cash Herrera, who's a quarterback commit in this class, coming up next year for the class of 2026. That's what I love about Tim Lester. He's not about scared feelings and making people nervous. No, go compete. Go win the job. It's just so different than what we saw in the previous regime. But I do want to go here with you. Here's a quote from yesterday during the press conference and what Tim Lester had to say about the wide receivers. And I think it paints a picture when you're going through this. Look, it's not a call out of Brian Ferentz, right? That's not what this is at all. This is, though, I think something that is very eye-opening for Tim Lester and how these kids were coached beforehand. How were they coached by the previous offensive coordinator? And hearing just this little quote from Tim Lester yesterday, I think was a huge, huge eye-opener.
The wideout room, they're just young, you know. But when you know what you're doing, you run. I mean, you run. I mean, we are running, right? It's just fun to watch. So watch Seth Anderson run and Weege run. Like, they're not thinking about what to do. They're thinking about how to run the route. And so there was a lot of thinking going on last year. There's not a lot of thinking going on. It's really just trying to press the issue, especially when you're trying to stretch the field vertically. The ability to run a route and not look back at 5 yards and don't look back for 20, you know. And Seth's done a really good job of that. Dayton's doing a good job of that. So it's been fun just because we're a faster team right now because they're running faster. The plays haven't changed. They just have run them, you know, enough times finally. So I think that's really helped us, you know, with the quarterbacks because they're getting themselves more open. Obviously, the quarterbacks, the more open the receiver are, it's been really helpful to them to have the tight ends know what they're doing, the wideouts know what they're doing, and they're starting to learn coverage, which is a big part of this offense. I don't know how much it was before when we started teaching them coverage and why we motion and what information we pick up from the motions. They looked to me kind of funny when I first got here. Now they're starting to answer questions. You know, I asked Dayton a question the other day in a unit meeting. He led off his answer with, "Well, I know it's man coverage because of the motion." I stopped and clapped, and I was like, "That was the great start to this answer." You know, like, you know the coverage now, so now you're going to run the ball. And so they're starting to see things. So I think they're more comfortable with the system. I'm excited with where they're at. We have a long way to go, but they're just more confident, and we're able to make nuances, adjustments really quick, and they can go out there on the next route. It's fixed. And so we're still a little short on routes sometimes because we get excited and we get a lot of third down red zone situations where there's a lot of little nuances that we got to get better at. But I've been very happy with their progression as we expected it to happen. And it's obviously shown with some more success.
So there it is, as you hear from Tim Lester and the running of routes, the guys beforehand not understanding why you're going in motion, not reading defenses. They're very damning. You know, he went on and he was talking about having people in the room and taking, you know, options, vision, conversations from other members of the staff. It paints a picture of what he is, but it also paints a different kind of picture, I think, of the previous regime. We're ready to move on. The schedule is going to be tough this year. This is going to be an incredibly difficult season on paper for Iowa coming up. But I believe they have the guy. I believe they have a guy in Tim Lester that is going to continue to elevate. What we saw a year ago was just the beginning. Yeah, running back, it's going to look different. Caleb Johnson was otherworldly. He is a once-in-a-decade type of talent that they had back there, and he certainly showed that. Kamari Moulton has shown flashes. Jazzion Penderson, solid, dependable. DJ Washington, back now, full-time at that spot at running back after playing a bit of receiver a year ago. The young guys, Brevin Dahl, Xavier Williams, and then they bring in another kid this on the freshman class who's going through spring practice for the first time. There's a lot of buzz about McNeil. So overall, they're going to get there. They bring in more talent now in Bryce George to either take over the left tackle spot or add some depth to this offensive line. I'm excited. about the offense. I'm as excited about the offense as I've been in a really long time because I believe in Tim Lester. They got the right guy. And go back 15 months ago when we were going through the coaching search for the new offensive coordinator, and it felt like it was taking forever, and it did, but they got the right guy. That's the most important. Credit to Kirk Ferentz. Maybe went outside of his comfort zone a little bit, but I think we're going to see this pay dividends. In order for that to happen, though, in the win-loss column, not only does the offense need to continue to improve and show something in the passing game this year, that defense has got to get better than it was a year ago. One specific spot, cornerback. They got guys there. They're looking at some others. We'll talk a little bit about what we heard from Phil Parker, the Iowa defense, plus a look at the special teams. We talk more Iowa football, taking a look at the D when we come back on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Ever check your bank account and wonder, hey, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. We started using Monarch Money here at our house, realizing just how much we were spending on online shopping. It felt like there was a package, not every day, every hour it felt like one was showing up. Now we're budgeting smarter and saving more. Plus, you can manage money with your partner as smooth as ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Make sure you use the code It's Locked On College at monarchmoney.com. That'll get you 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com with the code Locked On College for half off your first year. Online, monarchmoney.com. Trent Condon back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Your team every day. That's what we do here on the Locked On Network. A big shout out to the everydayers out there with us each and every day. Hit subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening, 5-star reviews helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Continuing the football conversation as we heard from the coordinators. And we go next to the defense. I think maybe probably the most surprising, I shouldn't even say surprising, the most intriguing element of the conversation was when yesterday we hear from Phil Parker, a guy that is not exactly, he doesn't lay on a whole lot of superlatives on the positive front. But when he was talking about TJ Hall, we go back 3 years ago. TJ Hall steps in. TJ Hall didn't go very well for him early in his career. But this was a guy that was a big-time prospect. You know, Iowa doesn't beat Michigan for many guys. They did in this instance. And yet early in his career, there were struggles. And last year, there were inconsistencies, certainly, a season ago. And to hear that right now, he believes he's probably their best cornerback and that he's made the leap. Because as everydayers know, and people that listen to the program every day, you know, we talk about guys making the leap late in their career and just the sheer volume of defensive backs that this has happened to, and specifically at the cornerback spot, and guys that have really struggled early in their careers and then take that step forward and become impactful players in their final go around. And I think TJ Hall has that opportunity. And from the sounds of it, it looks like Phil Parker thinks it's there too. Deshaun Lee, another inconsistent throughout the course of this one, but there's a reason. They're looking for depth, and I think they want to find somebody else that can come in and push these guys. You look at the rest of that roster in the cornerback spot, there's just not a whole lot of depth right now in that one. If TJ Hall, though, ascends to be that lockdown corner, if he becomes that kind of guy, it improves so much of what Iowa does defensively. And you think back of those great defenses, a lot of times they had one area of the field shut down. And go back just to 2 years ago, before the step back that they took defensively last season. And of course, it's Cooper DeJean, what he was able to do of absolutely locking things down. So I think that's going to be something that we definitely have to take a big look at what Phil Parker had to say. I also want to mention the defensive tackle position. And defensive tackle, when we go back right after last season, right after the bowl game concluded, and as we were looking at the roster and the makeup, obviously we're going to be hearing Y.A. Black's name called sometime here during the NFL draft. And when it comes to Y.A. Black, I think you're going to have a whole lot of people that are going to say maybe kicking themselves, because I just see him. He's going to be so dependable, so solid. He meant so much these last 2 years and last 3 years, really, in the middle, occupying space, taking on multiple blockers, and allowing behind him Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson, Sebastian Castro, those guys to be able to make plays just because about who he was and what he did. It didn't show up in the stat sheet. It's tough work. Well, how do you replace that? Aaron Graves is another guy that continues to ascend. And last year we saw a couple of those pop plays, and he became more of a consistent guy, play in and play out, that you were going to be able to get. And you're thinking that there's going to be another level to him, certainly, this year. See that part of it. But you looked at Jeremiah Pittman. He was a rotational piece this year. He was fine, but that's about it. And if you're going into the year with that, then a couple of guys that are not highly regarded, had a walk-on in there, it was not a position in defensive tackle that was awe-inspiring. So they go to the portal and they bring in two guys. You start with Jonah Pace. So Jonah Pace comes in, 6'5", 285, just plug and play, right? Productive player, good solid player in the MAC. He's going to come in. He's going to take that jump up, going from the MAC to the Big Ten. You know he's going to be solid. Is he going to be all conference? Is he going to be elite? Probably not. But the other guy I want to talk about at D tackle is Bryce Hawthorne. So this is a kid in Hawthorne, not highly regarded coming out of high school, suburban Minneapolis kid. He ends up at South Dakota State. And so many of the guys that we talk about in the transfer portal, and specifically for football, is these guys late in their career, right? These guys that have a year left, maybe two, and you're going to see what you can kind of get out of them and see if they're able to translate what they were doing to the success. That's not the case here with Hawthorne. He's still got 3 years of eligibility. And with it, you have a player I thought was going to be more of that kind of developmental piece. He'll come in this year, kind of learn the ropes, and then after Pace moves on, after Graves moves on, maybe he'll be a guy in 2026 that'll be competing for a starting job. Now, that's not to say that I believe Bryce Hawthorne's going to be a starter, but I think he's going to be a bigger part of the rotation right away this year. And that's big, because now you're creating that kind of depth. And as we go back through time, and outside of a couple of hiccup seasons, when Iowa's been at their best, obviously being good at the defensive line has been incredibly important. But over the last 15 years now, it's not just about being good with your top 3 or 4 guys. It's about being good with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys on the defensive line, keeping them fresh, being able to rotate, not having a big drop-off when that is happening. That has been a huge component to the success that Iowa's had out of the defensive side of the football. So some good stuff there, certainly, from Phil Parker. Also, Lavar Woods, got to hear from him a little bit. Lavar's thoughts on the special teams. Brought up a lot of names that we don't talk about a ton. Guys that are a little bit further down the list, if you will. Talked about Reese Dakin and Drew Stevens, both the specialists. Now, I was in such a good spot going into this year. And I know last year, if you were with us back during the fall, there might have been times that I was a little bit hard to Reese Dakin. And it was nothing obviously personal. I never met him or anything like that. It was more, I think I was trying to have everybody realize what he was walking into. Because I think there were so many people that thought that, yeah, there's going to be some kind of step back from Tory Taylor. But I just wanted to warn everybody, it's going to be significant. Because Tory Taylor showed up, not at 18 years old, showed up in a dude in his 20s. Guy had been about around the block a time or two. Not only that, remember his freshman year. There was nobody in the stands Tory's freshman season. Not the case for Dakin. And though there were some low moments, it wasn't brutal by any means. And you saw the growth out of him as he became more comfortable. Talking about him improving leg strength and understanding. He can boom it. That's not going to be a problem, as we've said a lot. I think this is a buzzword of the day, right? Consistency. And they're definitely getting that. Few other things to mention. And you go to the return game with Coach Woods. Caden Weechin, back for another season. Weejan, we know what kind of dynamic playmaker he is going to be, but his running mate back there, at least in kick returns, Max White, is in the portal. Now that's another story. And if you heard the roster limit that we talked about at 105 players, now the judge that is settling the case with the NCAA and former players, and what is happening there is she's not so sure about those roster limits. So who knows how this is going to turn out. But for the here now, let's play along with me. Talking about a few guys, though, that might be into the returning game. Zach Lutmer, that one, a little bit surprised by. Sam Phillips, no. Sam Phillips, the transfer from Chattanooga, we know lightning fast. He was brought in for one thing, and that's his speed component that he's able to do. That makes a whole lot. But a guy that we mentioned a little bit earlier, the freshman running back in McNeil, him along with Kamari Moulton, were both mentioned back there. I know that Brevin Dahl, that's a possibility that we might see him on that base. A couple other names, KJ Parker, TJ Washington. So overall, a lot of different guys to go with Weechin and with Lavar. One thing that I think bears mentioning when it comes to that is this year. Yes, schedule, tough. It's a bear. And when the Big Ten slate begins, you open up on the road at Rutgers, Indiana, playoff team. You go to Wisconsin. You come home for Penn State, playoff team. You get the Gophers in a rivalry game. Oregon after that, playoff team. You go to USC. We know how the West Coast is for Iowa. Return for Michigan State team that beat you last year. And you wrap up at Nebraska. And that's a gauntlet. We haven't been seeing any of those trick plays lately. Maybe Lavar, something up his sleeve for the back end of things. A lot of football talk today, but we can't live just on football alone. Other things going on in the world of Hawkeye athletics. We'll talk about a commitment for the women's team we talked about just the other day, plus the Iowa baseball team, a monster matchup with the Hoosiers. We'll talk about that and what a series win can mean for the Iowa Hawkeye baseball team. When we come back, this is Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So the big news from yesterday, Chit Chat Wright has officially made her commitment to the Hawkeyes. We talked a ton about her the day previous when she was on her visit. Felt like, and as I told you at the time before the commitment was official, Iowa felt like they were in really good shape, and it came to fruition. So we'll give you a little tip of the ball cap on that one. It's a necessity, right? Had to have a point guard. Addie Deal, I don't think she's ready to be a full-time point guard yet. She can handle the ball, but you don't want to put that in the hands of a freshman with the team like they have next year. Hannah Stolke is going to be playing more of the 4 next year. And obviously what we saw from Ava Hayden last year, the incoming freshman Layla Hayes, who comes in, going to be ready to go, I believe, and help out maybe even quicker than what we saw at Hayden this season. You got a couple of 5s there. Now Stolke at the 4. Still, I think, looking for a wing player, a shooter on the perimeter. After the loss of Hannah Stolke, the loss of Sydney Fulter, what she brought to the toughness, rebounding, I think they're going to be okay there. But the next level is what she can do with that outside shot. She was also good off the bounce, and finding that kind of playmaker on the wing is something that's going to be important for Iowa. Big get, though, in getting Chit Chat Right out of Georgia Tech, and already the new coach for Iowa, definitely helping out in a big time way. But we wrap up with the Iowa baseball team. So after Tuesday's just dreadful performance, awful, you're left wondering kind of what this is going to look like. We mentioned that it was a pretty important game against St. Thomas, not just to get off the schneid, but it was a decent St. Thomas team. Came in with an RPI in the 125 range. They got the win. Got a 10-inning win. So it sets up the series against Indiana. And the Hoosiers with an RPI of 80, kind of in the same boat as Iowa. They're 12-9 in the Big Ten, 23-18 overall. But the Hoosiers, they're playing better here in the back half. They beat up Michigan State at the beginning of the month. Against Illinois, they dropped 2 out of 3 against them before bouncing back and getting a series win against Maryland. Still, this is another one for Iowa because of the hole that has been dug, because of what the Big Ten is and its pecking order. even if you win a regular season crown, there is no guarantee that they're going to be an NCAA tournament team. You have to continue the momentum, have to get a victory here. And I really think the way that Obermueller did not pitch well last weekend against Michigan as they got the sweep. He was the guy that was, I guess, the most disappointing out of the starters. I don't think you're going to see that twice. I think they're going to get off on the right foot, going to get things started Friday against the Hoosiers in a good way, get that series victory, and just keep piling it up. As Iowa sits in front of UCLA, Oregon, USC, and Washington. It's just crazy to think about. And the Huskies still coming up on that schedule. Oregon also a little bit later on in the year. That does it for today. Locked On Hawkeyes. We got you covered each and every day. Shout out again to you, everydayers. Your team every day here on the Locked On Network. And we got a whole lot more. It's not just Locked On Hawkeyes. There's a whole lot more there. Maybe you're into the portal. And if you are, Brian Smith has been doing a great job with the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back with you tomorrow. We will hear from Elliot Clough from Rivals, some thoughts from Elliot on everything going on in the world of recruiting. We got to get back into the men's basketball front because Ben McCullum, he's not finished either. We'll talk about that a little bit more on tomorrow's show. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.